Son abandoned mother for being poor. Little did he know what fate would make her a billionaire. Dorothy Harper felt the sweat dripping down her face as she dug the dry earth with an old rusty hoe. At 70 years old, her calloused hands trembled slightly with the effort, but she didn't stop working on the small patch of land that remained around her dilapidated house in the countryside of West Virginia. It had been 5 years since Mitchell, her only son, had left for Charlotte without looking back. In their last argument, he had shouted that he couldn't stand living in that misery anymore, that he was ashamed to introduce a mother who lived like a beggar to his engineering college classmates. The words still echoed in her mind every morning when she woke up alone in the little wooden house with leaks in the roof and windows without glass. The small vegetable garden she tried to maintain was her only source of income. She sold the few tomatoes and onions she managed to grow in the arid soil to her neighbors, but it was barely enough to buy the basics. The soil was becoming increasingly difficult to work, as if resisting her efforts. Even so, Dorothy did not give up. It was all she knew how to do, all she had left. That October morning, while digging near the back of the yard, trying to expand her small plot, the hoe hit something hard. The sound was different, metallic. She thought it was a piece of buried scrap iron and continued digging around it to remove it. When she finally managed to unearth the object, she was surprised. It wasn't iron, but a strange stone, heavy and with a different shine from anything she had ever seen. The stone was the size of a closed fist and had golden veins that seemed to shine even under the strong morning sun. Dorothy cleaned it with the hem of her skirt and examined it more closely. She had never seen anything like it. She put the stone in her apron pocket and kept digging, curious to see if she would find anything else interesting. To her surprise, with every dig, more similar stones appeared, some smaller, others larger, all with that peculiar shine. In 2 hours of work, she had collected almost a dozen of them. Dorothy's heart began to beat faster. Could it be that those stones had some value? The sun was high when she decided to look for her neighbor, Walter, an 82-year-old man who had worked as a prospector in his youth. If anyone could say something about those stones, it would be him. Walter lived 300 yards away, in a house as simple as hers, but he had always been kind and helpful. "Mrs. Dorothy, what a nice surprise," said Walter, when she knocked on his door, holding a cloth bag with some of the stones. Come in, come in. I was just having some coffee." "Walter, you who understand these prospecting things, I wanted you to look at some stones I found in the yard," she said hesitantly. "I don't know if it's just my foolishness, but I thought they were different." When Dorothy spread the stones on the simple kitchen table in Walter's house, the man's face changed completely. He picked up one of the larger stones, took it to the window to examine it better in the natural light, and then returned to the table with a serious expression. "Where exactly did you find this?" he asked, his voice showing a concern that wasn't there before. "In the back of the yard, near the fence. Why, is it something bad?" Walter shook his head slowly, still examining the stones. He had worked in prospecting for over 20 years and recognized signs of valuable mining when he saw them. Those stones were not common quartz as he had initially thought. There was something in them that stirred memories of important discoveries he had witnessed decades ago. "Mrs. Dorothy, you need to take these stones to someone who understands more than I do. There's a retired professor here in town, Dr. Mitchell, who studied geology in university. I think he should take a look at this." "But is it really something valuable?" she insisted. "I can't say for sure, but—" Walter paused, choosing his words carefully. "In my experience, when the earth keeps secrets for so long and suddenly decides to reveal them, it's because something important is happening." Dorothy left Walter's house with more questions than answers. Dr. Gerald lived in the center of the small town, about 2 kilometers away. She would have to walk under the strong sun, but curiosity was greater than tiredness. She carefully placed the stones in the cloth bag and began the walk. Dr. Gerald's house was one of the best maintained in town, with a small garden in front and a discreet plaque on the door indicating that a geology consultant lived there. Dorothy hesitated before knocking. This educated man might not want to waste time with a poor woman and her strange stones, but the need to know the truth was stronger than shyness. She knocked on the door 3 times, and within a few minutes, A gentleman with greying hair and thick glasses appeared. Dr. Gerald was about 65 and had the gentle manner of someone who spent his life studying. "How can I help you?" he asked, noticing the cloth bag she carried. "Doctor, sorry to bother you. I'm Dorothy Harper. I live in the rural area. Walter said you might take a look at some stones I found in my backyard." Dr. Gerald invited her in and led her to his small office, where there was a table with magnifying glasses and other instruments Dorothy couldn't identify. When she showed the stones, Dr. Gerald fell silent for a long time, examining each one carefully. "Where exactly did you find these?" was his first question, echoing the same concern Walter had shown. "In the back of my yard. I was digging to make a larger vegetable garden, and they appeared." Dr. Gerald continued examining the stones with instruments she had never seen. He took notes in a notebook and occasionally muttered something to himself. The process lasted almost an hour, and Dorothy began to get nervous from his silence. "Mrs. Dorothy," he said finally, taking off his glasses and looking at her seriously, "do you have any idea exactly where you were digging? Can you show me on the map?" He opened a map of the region on the table, and Dorothy, with some difficulty, managed to point out the approximate location of her property. Dr. Gerald made a mark on the map and then went back to examining the stones. "I need to be honest with you. These stones are very special. I can't give a definitive report without more precise equipment, but from what I'm seeing here, there's a strong possibility you found something of considerable value." "Considerable value how?" asked Dorothy, feeling her heart race. "I can't confirm anything yet, but would it be possible for you to take me to the place where you found these stones? I'd like to examine the area personally." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next day, Dr. Gerald showed up at Dorothy's house with a backpack full of equipment and a thick notebook for notes. She led him to the back of the yard, where she had dug the day before. The hole was still open, and some similar stones remained visible in the turned earth. The geologist worked for 3 hours, digging carefully and examining every piece of earth and rock he found. He took measurements with instruments that emitted strange sounds and collected samples from different depths. Dorothy watched in silence, growing more and more anxious to know what he was discovering. "Mrs. Dorothy, I need to take these samples to a lab in the capital," he finally said, wiping his hands on his clothes. "But I can tell you one thing. There's a very interesting geological formation here. Very interesting indeed." "What exactly does that mean?" "It means you might be sitting on top of something that will change your life completely." Dr. Gerald promised to return in a week with the lab results. Dorothy spent the following days trying to maintain her normal routine, tending her small garden and selling her vegetables. But it was impossible not to think about his words. Could it be possible that after a lifetime of poverty, the solution to her problems was literally beneath her feet? That Tuesday, while watering the few tomato plants she had managed to get to sprout, Dorothy noticed a black car parked on the dirt road that passed in front of her property. It wasn't common to see cars like that around there. Most people in the area walked or rode bicycles. The car stayed there for almost an hour, as if someone was watching her property. On Thursday, the same car appeared again, this time with 2 men inside. They sat parked on the road, clearly looking toward her house. Dorothy began to get worried. Was it a coincidence, or did it have something to do with the rocks she had found? On Saturday morning, Dr. Gerald returned as promised, but his expression was different. He seemed tense and kept looking around as if worried about something. Dorothy received him on the porch of the house, offering the simple coffee she always prepared for visitors. "Mrs. Dorothy, I need to talk to you about the test results," he said, sitting in the old wooden chair she had offered. "So, what did you find?" Dr. Gerald opened the briefcase he had brought and showed several pages with numbers and terms she didn't understand. But his expression said it all. He had discovered something important, very important. "The stones you found are not common. They are a type of ore that is very rare, very sought after by technology companies. And from the tests we did on the soil in your backyard, there is a strong possibility that your entire property sits on a significant deposit of this material." "Significant how?" Mrs. Dorothy, he said, pausing to choose the right words, if the estimates are correct, and I believe they are, you might be sitting on a deposit worth millions of dollars. The words didn't seem to make sense. Dorothy looked at the man in front of her, then at her humble little house, at her calloused hands, at the dry land where she had tried to make something grow for decades. Millions of dollars. She couldn't even imagine how much money that was. But, Doctor, how is that possible? This land has never yielded anything. It's always been dry and difficult. Sometimes nature hides its greatest treasures in the most unlikely places. What you need to know now is that other people might discover this soon too. The type of test we did leaves traces in the system. Someone might show up here wanting to buy your property. As if on cue, at that very moment, they heard the sound of a car approaching. It was the same black car Dorothy had seen during the week. This time it stopped right in front of her property gate, and two men in suits got out. "Mrs. Dorothy Harper?" asked the first man, a tall, thin fellow with a briefcase in hand. "Yes, that's me. My name is Daniel Patterson. I represent the Blue Sky Construction Company. We would like to speak with you about a proposal to purchase your property." Dr. Gerald and Dorothy exchanged glances. It was happening exactly as he had predicted. The news about the mineral deposit had somehow leaked, and now interested parties were showing up. "What kind of offer?" asked Dorothy, trying to stay calm. "We're developing a housing project in the area, and your property is in a strategic location. We can offer a very attractive price, well above market value for rural land." The second man opened a briefcase and showed documents with numbers. Dorothy couldn't read them properly without her glasses, but Dr. Gerald stepped closer to take a look. His expression changed immediately. "Exactly how much are you offering?" asked the geologist. $200,000 cash, replied Daniel Patterson with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Dr. Gerald almost choked. If his estimates were correct, that property was worth at least 500 times more than what they were offering. It was a clear attempt to deceive an elderly lady who had no knowledge of the real value of her land. "You don't need to decide now," the man continued. "But it's a limited-time offer. We're interested in closing the deal this very week." "I need to think," replied Dorothy, feeling the tension in the air. Of course, but don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't come along every day." The two men handed over a business card and left, but Dorothy noticed they didn't leave completely. The car stopped further down the road, as if they were waiting for something. "Mrs. Dorothy, don't sign anything without talking to me first," said Dr. Gerald as soon as they left. $200,000 is a ridiculous amount compared to what your property might actually be worth. "But doctor, $200,000 is more money than I've seen in my entire life." "I understand, but if our estimates are correct, you could be turning down a fortune of $100 million or more." $100 million. Dorothy felt her legs go weak. It was a number so large it made no sense in her head. How could a woman who struggled to get money to buy a kilogram of rice be the owner of $100 million? "What do I do now?" she asked, genuinely lost. "First, you need to hire a lawyer specializing in mineral rights. Second, you need a more detailed analysis of the entire property. And third, don't talk about this with anyone yet. The fewer people who know, the better." Dr. Gerald promised to help her find reliable professionals and said goodbye, recommending she not leave the house alone for the next few days. The situation was getting complicated, and he was afraid that unscrupulous people might try to pressure an elderly lady into making hasty decisions. That night, Dorothy could barely sleep. Lying on the thin mattress she had used for over 10 years, staring at the leaky ceiling of the small house, she tried to process everything that had happened. Could it be that her entire life of poverty was just a cruel twist of fate? That the wealth had always been there beneath her feet, while she went hungry and cold? And why was this happening now when she was alone? Why hadn't it happened when Mitchell was still home, when perhaps they could have had a different life together? The questions multiplied in her mind, but the answers didn't come. The next morning, Dorothy woke to the sound of more cars arriving. This time there were 3 different vehicles, with people she didn't recognize. Some had cameras, others carried strange equipment. The news had leaked, and now her property was becoming the center of unwanted attention. A middle-aged woman with a microphone in her hand approached the house gate. She was a reporter from the local TV station who had found out about the possible mineral discovery and wanted an exclusive interview with Dorothy. Behind her, other journalists and onlookers began to gather. "Mrs. Dorothy, is it true you discovered a buried treasure on your property?" shouted the reporter over the wooden gate. Dorothy hid inside the house, unsure how to handle all the commotion. In 48 hours, her quiet, peaceful life had turned into a circus. She hadn't asked for any of it. All she wanted was to keep tending her small vegetable garden and live in peace. The house phone, which almost never rang, began ringing insistently. It was journalists, business people, some offering help, others trying to schedule meetings. Dorothy unplugged the phone from the wall, but that didn't stop people from continuing to show up at her door. Around midday, a familiar car stopped in front of the gate. It was Dr. Gerald, but this time he wasn't alone. He had brought a lawyer, a man of about 50, with a briefcase full of documents and a serious, trustworthy expression. "Mrs. Dorothy, this is attorney Benjamin Walker, a lawyer specializing in mineral rights," said the geologist as soon as they managed to get inside the house, dodging the journalists still on the road. "Pleased to meet you," said the attorney, extending his hand. "Dr. Gerald explained the situation to me. I'm here to help you protect your rights." "Protection from what?" she asked. "From people who will try to take advantage of your lack of knowledge on the subject. What's happening here is very serious, and you need to make the right decisions." Attorney Benjamin explained that the first thing to do was a complete geological analysis of the property, conducted by an independent and reliable company. Only then would it be possible to determine the real value of the mineral deposit and the best way to exploit it. "You have 3 options," he explained. "Sell the property for a fixed sum, enter into a partnership with a mining company, and receive a percentage of the profits, or create your own mining company. Each option has different advantages and risks." "Which would you recommend?" asked Dorothy. "It's too early to decide. First, we need to know exactly what we have here. But I can say one thing. If the preliminary estimates are correct, you will never have to worry about money again." That afternoon, Attorney Benjamin hired a security company to protect the property and prevent unauthorized people from entering the land. He also obtained a court order preventing journalists from approaching the house without Dorothy's permission. Meanwhile, about 300 kilometers away in the capital of West Virginia, a 35-year-old young engineer was reading the news online in his modern office in downtown Charlotte. Mitchell Harper, who had graduated from UNC Charlotte 10 years ago, worked for a mid-sized construction company and lived a comfortable life in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Myers Park area. The news that caught his attention was about the discovery of a mineral deposit in a small town in the countryside, in the region where he had grown up. The town's name was familiar to him, very familiar. It was exactly the town where he was born and spent the first 18 years of his life, before getting a scholarship and leaving for the capital. But what really made his heart stop was when he saw the name of the property owner where the discovery had been made. Dorothy Harper, his mother, the woman he had abandoned 5 years earlier, promising himself he would never return to that place of poverty and suffering. Mitchell's hands trembled as he read the details of the news. According to experts consulted by the newspaper, the mineral deposit could be worth tens of millions of dollars. His mother, the same woman who couldn't afford a pair of shoes without holes, could be sitting on top of one of the largest fortunes ever discovered in the region. The irony of the situation hit him like a punch in the gut. He had abandoned his mother because he was ashamed of the poverty she lived in. Now he discovered she could become one of the richest people in the state, and he wasn't there to share either the moment of discovery or the joy she must certainly be feeling. Mitchell tried to focus on work for the rest of the afternoon, but it was impossible. His mind was completely focused on the news and the memories it had stirred. He remembered the last time he had seen his mother, 5 years earlier, when he had yelled at her saying he was tired of being seen as poor by his college classmates. "You embarrass me," he had said to her that terrible day. "I can't stand coming here and seeing this misery anymore. I want a better life, and you just drag me down." The words had come out of his mouth like poison, and he had watched his mother's face crumble in pain. She hadn't tried to argue, hadn't yelled back. She just looked at him with a deep sadness and said, "Then go away, son. Go live your better life." And he had indeed gone away. He had taken the few things he owned, boarded the bus to Charlotte, and never looked back. In the following 5 years, he had built a solid career, made new friends, dated a few women, lived a life he considered worthy. But he had always avoided talking about his family or his origins. Now, reading about the discovery that could turn his mother into a millionaire, Mitchell realized he might have made the biggest mistake of his life. Not only for abandoning a woman who loved him unconditionally, but for missing the opportunity to be by her side at the most important moment of her existence. That night, Mitchell couldn't sleep. He stayed awake until morning researching everything he could find about the mineral discovery on his mother's property. The news was increasingly impressive. According to geologists consulted by the press, the deposit could be one of the largest ever found in the region, with the potential to generate profits for decades. The next day he couldn't concentrate at work. His colleagues noticed he was distracted and asked if everything was okay, but Mitchell didn't know how to explain the situation, how to say he had abandoned his own mother and now discovered she might be rich. Around noon, Mitchell made an impulsive decision. He asked for a few days off work, citing family problems, and decided to travel to the town where he had grown up. He didn't know exactly what he would do when he got there, but he felt he needed to see his mother, even if just from afar. The drive to the town took 4 hours. As he approached the familiar places of his childhood, Mitchell felt his chest tighten with emotion and regret. Nothing seemed to have changed much. The same simple houses, the same dirt roads, the same faces he vaguely remembered from his youth. When he finally arrived at his mother's property, Mitchell was shocked by what he saw. There was a crowd of people, unfamiliar cars, equipment he didn't recognize, and even a TV van parked on the road. His mother had become a local celebrity overnight. He stopped his car at a safe distance and watched the commotion. There were men in suits walking the grounds, others operating machines that seemed to be taking measurements, and journalists trying to get interviews. Amid all that confusion, Mitchell managed to spot a familiar figure, his mother, standing on the porch of the little house, watching everything with a lost expression. Dorothy looked smaller than he remembered, more fragile. She wore the same kind of simple clothes she had always worn, but now she was surrounded by people in expensive attire who clearly saw her as a business opportunity. Mitchell felt a mix of guilt and protectiveness he hadn't felt in years. For 2 hours, he stayed there watching from afar without the courage to approach. What would he say to her? How would he explain 5 years of abandonment? How would he ask for forgiveness for leaving her life precisely when she most needed someone to trust? When the activity began to slow down in the late afternoon, Mitchell finally got out of the car and walked slowly toward the property. His mother was watering some tomato plants in the yard, the same activity she did when he was a child. The scene was so familiar that for a moment he felt as if he were 15 again. "Mum," he called softly, standing a few yards away. Dorothy turned slowly, not believing what she was seeing. For a few seconds, mother and son looked at each other in silence, not knowing how to react. She had dreamed of this moment for 5 years, but now that it was actually happening, she didn't know what to feel. "Mitchell," she finally said, dropping the small hose she used to water the plants. "Hi, Mum." They continued to look at each other, separated by yards of distance and 5 years of hurt. Mitchell wanted to run and hug her, ask for forgiveness for everything he had done, but he knew it wouldn't be that simple. He had left when she needed him most, and now he returned just when she didn't need anyone anymore. "What are you doing here?" asked Dorothy, her voice mixing surprise, joy, and resentment. "I heard the news about the discovery on your land." "Oh, so that's why you came back." The coldness in her voice hit him like a slap. It was exactly what he deserved, but it hurt more than he had imagined. Mitchell realized she thought he had come back interested in the money, and the truth was he himself didn't even fully know his own motivations. "It's not what you're thinking, Mom. What am I thinking?" she interrupted, and for the first time in 5 years there was anger in her voice. I'm thinking that my son abandoned me when I was poor and now shows up here because he found out I might get rich. It's not like that, Mom. I came because... Because what, Mitchell? Because you suddenly remembered you have a mother. Because you're not ashamed of me anymore. His words from 5 years ago came back to haunt him. He had said he was ashamed of her, that she held him back, that he wanted a better life away from that poverty. Now those words sounded as cruel as any a son could say to a mother. Mom, I know I made a terrible mistake. I know the things I said were unfair and cruel. I came here to ask for forgiveness, not because of the money. 5 years, Mitchell. 5 years without a call, without a visit, without knowing if I was alive or not. And now you show up here asking for forgiveness? Mitchell felt tears burning his eyes. She was right. There was no excuse for what he had done. No matter how he tried to explain his motivations at the time, nothing justified completely abandoning a woman who had sacrificed everything to raise him alone. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said, trying to control his voice. But I needed to come here. I needed to see you. I needed to say I'm sorry for everything I did. Dorothy watched him for a long moment, studying the face she knew so well, but that now belonged to a stranger. Mitchell had a well-groomed beard, expensive clothes, a watch that probably cost more than she made in a year. He had gotten the better life he wanted, but apparently without her. All right, you've said you're sorry. Now you can leave and continue your better life. Mom, please. Please, what? You want me to say everything's fine? That I forgive you, and now we can be a happy family again? Want to split with me the money I might get from this land? I don't want any of your money, Mom. I just wanted... You just wanted what? Clear your conscience. Feel better about yourself. The conversation was going exactly the way Mitchell had feared. He realized his mother had built an emotional barrier around her heart during the years of abandonment, and it wouldn't be one conversation that would tear down that protection. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Mom, I understand your anger. I understand you don't trust me. But I wanted you to know that I haven't spent a single day without thinking of you, without regretting having left that way. Then why didn't you come back sooner? Why didn't you call, write, give any sign of life? The question caught Mitchell off guard because he didn't have a good answer. The truth was, he had convinced himself it was better for both of them to keep their distance, that he could build a new life away from the memories of poverty, and she could move on without worrying about the demands of an ambitious son. I thought it was better that way. I thought you'd be better off without me filling your head with dreams of a different life. You thought I'd be better off alone? I didn't know how to help anymore, Mom. I felt like I was only bringing frustration to us both. The only thing I wanted was to have my son nearby, Mitchell. I didn't care if we were poor or rich. I just wanted you to stay with me. Her words hit him like a blade. For years, he had convinced himself that leaving had been the right decision, that his ambition justified the abandonment. Now he realized he had simply run from his emotional responsibilities, leaving an elderly woman completely alone in the world. Mom, if I could turn back time. But you can't, can you? Time has passed. I've aged these 5 years alone, with no one to talk to, no one to share my worries with. You missed that, and I missed that too. Mitchell fell silent, observing the face marked by time and suffering of his mother. She had always seemed older than she really was, the result of a life of hard work and hardship. But now he noticed wrinkles that weren't there 5 years ago, a curvature in her back that was new, a weariness in her eyes that went beyond the physical. Where do you live now? She asked suddenly. In Charlotte. I have an apartment in Myers Park. What do you do for work? I'm a civil engineer at a construction company. Do you have a family, a wife, kids? No, I live alone. Dorothy nodded, as if processing this information and trying to understand how her son's life had unfolded during the years of separation. There was a natural curiosity mixed with the resentment. And are you happy with this life? The question took him by surprise. Mitchell had never seriously questioned his happiness. He had focused so much on building a career and maintaining a standard of living he considered adequate, that he never stopped to evaluate if he truly felt fulfilled. "I thought I was," he answered honestly. "But now, being here, talking to you, I don't know anymore." "Why?" "Because I realized I've built an empty life. I have a job, I have an apartment, I have money, but I don't have anyone who really cares about me. And the only person who always cared, I abandoned." "That's your problem, Mitchell. You chose this life." "I did choose it, and it was the worst choice I've ever made in my life." They stayed silent for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and pink, colors Mitchell remembered admiring many times in that same spot during his childhood. "Mum, can I stay in town for a few days? Not here at your house, I understand you don't want that. But maybe we could talk more calmly." "What for?" "To try to fix what I broke, to try to be the son I should have been." "Mitchell, do you think it's possible to fix 5 years of abandonment with a few conversations?" "I don't know, but I want to try." Dorothy observed him for a long moment, as if trying to see beyond the words and discover his true intentions. She had dreamed of her son's return all those years, but now that he was there, she felt confused about what she really wanted. "There's an inn in the center of town," she finally said. "You can stay there if you want, but I can't promise things will go back to how they were." "I don't expect them to. I just want a chance to show I've changed. Show how. I don't know yet, but I want to try." Mitchell said goodbye to his mother that day with a mixed feeling of hope and apprehension. She had accepted him staying in town, but that didn't mean she had forgiven him or was willing to rebuild their relationship. It would be a long and difficult process if it was even possible. He settled into the small inn in the center of town, a simple but clean place, very different from the hotels he was used to in Charlotte. The room had only the essentials: a bed, a wardrobe, a desk, and a small television. But he was there for a purpose far more important than comfort. The next morning, Mitchell returned to his mother's property, but this time he found even more activity than the day before. There were trucks unloading heavy equipment, technicians wearing uniforms from a mining company he didn't recognize, and several men in suits supervising the work. Dorothy was on the porch of the house, talking with 2 men who appeared to be lawyers. She was wearing her reading glasses and had some papers in her hand, clearly trying to understand complex documents. Mitchell realized she was being bombarded with technical and legal information that was probably difficult for someone with her limited formal education to comprehend. He approached slowly, not wanting to interrupt the conversation, but able to hear part of what was being discussed. The lawyers were talking about profit percentages, mining royalties, extraction contracts, and other terms that Mitchell, as an engineer, understood better than his mother. "Mrs. Dorothy, you need to understand that this contract guarantees you 15% of the net profits from the mining operation," one of the lawyers explained. "And is that good or bad?" she asked, clearly confused. "Well, compared to the offers other companies are making." "What other offers? You didn't receive the proposals from Green Valley Mining and National Extraction?" "I've received many proposals. I don't understand any of them." Mitchell realized his mother was being overwhelmed with complex decisions that could affect the rest of her life, but she didn't have enough knowledge to evaluate them properly. Although she had hired attorney Benjamin as her lawyer, it was evident she needed more help navigating that complicated world of contracts and negotiations. When the meeting ended and the lawyers left, Mitchell approached the porch where his mother had remained alone, looking at the papers with an expression of total confusion. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Mitchell, I didn't see you arrive. I noticed you were in an important meeting. Is it about the mining?" "Yes, but I don't understand anything these people keep talking about. Percentages, contracts, royalties. It's all very complicated for me." "Can I take a look at these documents? As an engineer, I understand a bit about this type of contract." Dorothy hesitated. Accepting help from her son would mean admitting she needed him, something her resentment didn't want to allow. But at the same time, she was truly lost in the middle of all that technical information. "Do you understand these things?" "I understand a bit. At the construction company where I work, we sometimes deal with contracts for supplying mining materials. I can at least explain what some of these terms mean." After a moment of consideration, Dorothy handed the papers to him. Mitchell sat in the wooden chair beside her and began to examine the documents. Immediately, his expression changed. "Mom, have you signed anything yet?" "No. Attorney Benjamin said not to sign anything without him reviewing it first." "Good. Look, I'm not an expert in mineral law, but some of these contracts seem very unfavorable to you." "How so?" "For example, this one here offers only 5% of the gross profits. That means you would receive 5% of everything they take from the land before deducting operating costs. And is that low?" "Very low. They'll deduct costs for equipment, transportation, processing, personnel, administration. In the end, there might be very little net profit left to share." "And this other one?" Mitchell examined the second contract and made a face. "This one is even worse. They want to buy all the mineral rights for a fixed sum of $5 million. Isn't $5 million a lot of money? Mum, if the estimates people are talking about are correct, and I believe they are, your property could produce profits of over $100 million over the next 20 years. $5 million would be like selling a diamond for the price of glass." Dorothy fell silent, absorbing the information. She was beginning to understand that the people approaching her didn't necessarily have her best interests in mind. "So what do I do? Who can I trust?" "Attorney Benjamin seems honest. He's trying to protect your interests, but you need more technical advice. Someone who specifically understands mining and can evaluate the proposals independently." "Do you know anyone like that?" "I can look into it. I have some contacts in the capital who might be able to recommend reliable professionals." Dorothy looked at him with an expression Mitchell couldn't completely decipher. There was surprise, perhaps even a bit of gratitude, but also distrust. "Why do you want to help me with this?" The question was direct and deserved an honest answer. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because maybe it's a way to start making up for 5 years of abandonment." "You think helping me with papers will make up for 5 years?" "No, but it's a start." That afternoon, Mitchell called some professional colleagues in Charlotte and got the contact for a mining consultant who had an excellent reputation in the market. Dr. Charles Edward Thompson had worked for 30 years at National Mining Group and now provided independent consulting to small landowners. When Mitchell explained the situation, Dr. Charles was interested in the case and agreed to travel to the town the next day to evaluate the situation personally. His fee was high, but Mitchell offered to pay the fees as a way to help his mother. "I don't want your money," said Dorothy when he made the proposal. "Mum, it's not a question of wanting or not. It's a question of you making the best possible decisions about your future." "And why do you care about my future?" "Because I love you. I've always loved you, even when I left." They were the first words of love he had said to her since his return, and they hung in the air between them. Dorothy felt her eyes well up, but quickly looked away. "Love isn't just words, Mitchell." "I know. That's why I want to show it with actions." The next day, Dr. Charles Thompson arrived at the property with a small team and measuring equipment far more sophisticated than anything that had appeared there before. He was a man of about 60, with graying hair and a serious but friendly manner. "Mrs. Dorothy, I've come here to conduct an independent assessment of your property," he explained. "I don't represent any mining company, so I have no interest in convincing you to accept or refuse any proposal. My job is simply to tell the truth about what you have here." For 3 days, Dr. Charles and his team took detailed measurements across the entire property. They drilled into the soil at various points, collected samples from different depths, and performed on-site chemical analyses. Mitchell accompanied part of the process, trying to learn as much as possible. On the 4th day, Dr. Charles requested a meeting with Dorothy, Mitchell, and Attorney Benjamin to present his findings. The meeting took place in the simple living room of Dorothy's house, with everyone seated around the wooden table where she had her meals. "Mrs. Dorothy, I have good and bad news for you," began the consultant, opening a folder with charts and numbers. "Tell me the bad news first," she requested. "The bad news is that your life is going to change completely. You will never again have the peace and quiet you had before." "And the good news?" The good news is that you are sitting on top of one of the largest deposits of tantalite ever discovered in the United States. My conservative estimate is that your property could yield more than $200 million in net profits over the next 25 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Dorothy looked at the numbers on the paper, then at Dr. Charles, then at Mitchell, as if expecting someone to tell her it was all a mistake. 200 million, she repeated softly. That's right, and I'm being conservative. Depending on how the mining is conducted, the value could be even greater. Mitchell felt a mixture of joy for his mother and sadness for himself. Joy because she would never want for anything again in her life. Sadness because he hadn't been present during the discovery that would change everything for her. What does this mean in practical terms? Asked Attorney Benjamin. It means that if Mrs. Dorothy makes the right choices, she could become one of the wealthiest people in West Virginia. But if she makes the wrong choices, she could lose a fortune. What kind of choices? First, she needs to decide how she wants to extract the ore. She can sell the rights for a fixed sum. She can partner with a large company and keep a percentage of the profits, or she can create her own mining company. Which do you recommend? Asked Dorothy. It depends on the level of risk you are willing to take. Selling for a fixed sum is safer, but yields much less. Creating your own company could yield more, but it's risky and labor-intensive. And the partnership? It could be a good middle option, provided the terms are favorable to you. Dr. Charles spent the rest of the afternoon explaining the advantages and disadvantages of each option. Mitchell took notes and asked technical questions that helped clarify important points. Dorothy watched the interaction between the consultant and her son, noticing how Mitchell demonstrated knowledge and genuine concern for her interests. When the meeting ended, Dr. Charles said goodbye, promising to prepare a detailed report with all the options and their implications. Mitchell walked him to his car and took the opportunity to speak privately. Dr. Charles, what is your honest opinion about my mother's situation? Your mother could become extremely wealthy, but she will need to be very careful not to be taken advantage of. There are many people interested in exploiting inexperienced landowners. And what about the proposals she has already received? They're all very unfavorable for her. Some are clearly attempts at a scam. What can I do to help her? Keep doing what you're doing. She needs someone she can trust to help her navigate this process. Someone with no financial interest in the outcome. She doesn't trust me completely yet. Give it time. Show through your actions that your interests are legitimate. That night, Mitchell had dinner with his mother for the first time in 5 years. It was a simple meal, rice, beans, a fried egg and salad, but loaded with emotional meaning. They talked about neutral subjects, the weather, the changes in the city, people they both knew. Remember when you were little and said you'd be rich one day? Commented Dorothy while washing the dishes. I do. I thought I'd do it by building buildings and making a lot of money. And you did. Not the way I imagined. I do well, but I'm not rich. And I've discovered that money doesn't bring happiness if you have no one to share it with. Now I'm the one who's going to be rich. Funny how life works, isn't it? You deserve it, Mom. You worked your whole life. You were always honest, always helped those in need. If anyone deserves this luck, it's you. I don't know if I deserve it. Sometimes I think it's too late. At 70, what am I going to do with so much money? You'll do whatever you want. You can travel, see places you've always dreamed of. You can renovate the house or buy a new house. You can help other people. Do you think money will make me happy? The question made him think. For years, he had chased financial success, believing it would bring him satisfaction. Now he realized he had sacrificed far more important things in the name of that pursuit. I think money gives security and opportunities. Happiness is something else. What is happiness for you? Honestly, I don't know anymore. I don't. I thought I knew, but now, seeing you being here, I realized I have no idea. For me, it was always having my son close by. That was all I ever wanted. Her words struck him deeply. For 5 years he had sought happiness in the wrong places, while she had continued wanting only the simplest thing in the world, to have her son close by. Mom, can I ask you something? You can? Do you want to forgive me? Or is the hurt too great? Dorothy stopped washing the dishes and stared out the kitchen window. It was a question she had asked herself every day since he had returned. I do want to, yes, but I'm also afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that you'll leave again. Afraid to trust you and be abandoned once more. I won't abandon you again, Mom, I promise. You've promised things before and didn't keep them. It was true. When he left to study in the capital, Mitchell had promised he would come back often, that he wouldn't let the distance affect them. He had broken that promise and many others over the years. You're right, my words aren't worth much now. I can only try to show through my actions that I've changed. How? By staying here, helping you with all of this, being the son I should have been all along. You have a job in Charlotte. I can resign, I can look for work here in the region, or I can use the money I've saved to start some business of my own and stay close. Dorothy looked at him with surprise. Giving up his job in Charlotte would mean sacrificing the career he had built, the life he had chosen, instead of her. You would do that? I would. In fact, I've already made the decision. I'm going to call my company tomorrow and give my notice. Mitchell, don't do this for me. I don't want you to sacrifice yourself and then blame me for ruining your career. Mom, I sacrificed myself for 5 years by staying away from you. Now I want to sacrifice myself by staying close. But what if things don't work out between us? What if we find out it's too late to fix our relationship? Then at least I'll have tried. I'd rather regret trying than keep regretting not trying. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, Mitchell called his boss in Charlotte and gave his notice. The decision caused surprise and attempts to dissuade him, but he stood his ground. He had made the most important decision of his life, and he wouldn't go back on it. Meanwhile, the situation at Dorothy's property was becoming increasingly complex. New mining companies sent representatives daily, the press remained interested in the story, and even local politicians began showing up offering support and partnerships. Attorney Benjamin had hired a security company to protect Dorothy from unwanted visitors. But even so, it was impossible to completely control the movement around the property. The quiet life she had always led was becoming a distant memory. Sometimes I miss when it was just me and my garden, she commented to Mitchell as they watched yet another group of businessmen arriving for a meeting. Do you feel you've lost your privacy? I feel I've lost my life. Now, I'm the rich mineral lady. I'm no longer just Dorothy. This will pass, Mom. When you make the decisions about how to develop the property, the interest will fade. You think so? I do. Novelty always attracts attention, but over time people get used to it. That day they received a visit from a representative of one of the country's largest mining companies. The American Mining Corporation had sent its regional vice president to make a proposal in person. The executive, a man of about 50 named Richard Anderson, arrived in an imported car accompanied by 2 assistants and a briefcase full of impressive documents. Mrs. Dorothy, it's an honor to meet you, he said, extending his hand with a rehearsed smile. We are the largest mining company in the state, and we want to make an irresistible proposal to you. What kind of proposal? Asked Attorney Benjamin, who was present at the meeting. We are offering $25 million for the exclusive mining rights to the property. It's the largest offer we've ever made to an individual owner. And for how long would those rights be? Mitchell wanted to know. Permanent. The company would assume all costs and risks of the operation, and Mrs. Dorothy would receive the full amount up front, tax-free. Tax-free how? Insisted Attorney Benjamin. Our company would handle all tax matters related to the mining. Mitchell and Attorney Benjamin exchanged looks. The offer seemed generous on the surface, but there were aspects that deserved deeper investigation. Can we have a few days to review the proposal? Asked Attorney Benjamin. Of course, but we can't keep the offer open for too long. We have other projects awaiting our attention. We understand. The lady needs time for such an important decision. After the executives left, Attorney Benjamin, Mitchell, and Dorothy gathered to discuss the proposal. What did you think? She asked. "25 million is a lot of money," said Attorney Benjamin, "but compared to Dr. Charles's estimates, it might still be low." "How so?" "If your property can really generate 200 million in profits over 25 years, 25 million would only be 12.5% of the total value." "But it would be guaranteed money, right?" argued Dorothy. "Yes, it would be guaranteed. It's a question of how much risk you want to take." "Mom," Mitchell interjected, "can I suggest something?" "You may." "Why don't we ask for a counteroffer? If they're offering 25 million, maybe they'll agree to pay more." "Do you think they would accept?" "There's only one way to find out." Attorney Benjamin agreed with the strategy. The next day they called Richard Anderson and said the offer would need to be at least 40 million to be seriously considered. The response came the same day. The company agreed to pay 35 million, but that would be their final offer. 35 million, Dorothy repeated to herself. It was such a large sum that her mind couldn't fully process the meaning. "What do you want to do?" asked Attorney Benjamin. "I don't know. It's a lot of money, but you said it could be worth much more." "The decision has to be yours, Mum," said Mitchell. "We can give our opinion, but you're the one who will live with the consequences." Dorothy spent the whole night awake thinking. $35 million was more money than she could imagine. It would be enough to live the rest of her life in total comfort, help other people, and still leave money for several generations of her family. On the other hand, if Dr. Charles's estimates were correct, she would be giving up a lot more money. But there was also the issue of risk. What if something went wrong with the mining? What if the ore price fell? What if there were environmental or legal problems? The next morning she woke up with a decision made. "I want to accept the $35 million offer," she announced to Mitchell and Attorney Benjamin. "Are you sure, Mom?" "I am. It's more money than I can spend in my lifetime. I'd rather be sure of a smaller amount than risk losing everything for a larger amount." "That's a sensible decision," said Attorney Benjamin. "I'll review the contract carefully before signing." "And I'll ask Dr. Charles to take one last look at the technical terms," added Mitchell. During the following week, Attorney Benjamin and Dr. Charles worked together to review all aspects of the contract with the American Mining Corporation. There were a few clauses that needed to be renegotiated, especially related to the environmental protection of the property and Dorothy's rights over the non-mined areas. At the end of the negotiations, the final contract guaranteed payment of $35 million up front, environmental protection of the areas around the house, Dorothy's right to continue living on the property for the rest of her life, the company's responsibility for all legal and environmental aspects of the mining, payment of all taxes by the company. "It's a good contract," assessed Dr. Charles. "It protects your interests and guarantees a significant sum. So, can we sign?" asked Dorothy. "We can," confirmed Attorney Benjamin. The contract signing took place on a Monday morning at Attorney Benjamin's office in the city. Besides Dorothy, Mitchell, Attorney Benjamin, Dr. Charles, Richard Anderson, and 2 legal representatives from the mining company were present. When Dorothy signed the last page of the contract, she officially became one of the richest people in the region. $35 million would be deposited into her bank account within 5 business days. "Congratulations, Mrs. Dorothy," said Richard Anderson, shaking her hand. "It was a pleasure doing business with you." After everyone left, Dorothy, Mitchell, and Attorney Benjamin were alone in the office. "And now?" she asked. "Now you need to decide how you want to manage this money," replied Attorney Benjamin. "Manage how?" "Investments, bank accounts, applications, that sort of thing. 35 million is too much money to leave sitting in a savings account." "I don't understand any of that." "That's why you need a trustworthy financial advisor," explained Mitchell. "Someone who can help you make the money grow safely. Do you know someone like that?" "I can look into it, but it has to be someone with an impeccable reputation who works in your interest, not their own." Over the following days, while they waited for the deposit confirmation, Mitchell researched financial advisory firms in the region and in the capital. He found a company with 20 years of experience in wealth management for private individuals with excellent references from other clients. When the $35 million were finally deposited into Dorothy's account, she spent the entire day looking at the statement, unable to believe those numbers were real. "Mother, now you are officially a millionaire," said Mitchell, trying to lighten the moment. "I don't feel like a millionaire. I feel confused." "Why?" "Because my whole life I thought that if I had money I would be happier, but now that I have it, I don't feel any different." "What do you feel?" "Worry, fear, responsibility." "Responsibility for what?" "For what to do with so much money, how to use it the right way." "You don't have to decide everything right now, Mother. You can take it slow, thinking about the things you really want to do." "What do you think I should do?" "First, secure your financial safety for the rest of your life. Second, do some things you've always wanted to do but never could. Third, if there's money left and you want to, help other people. I've always wanted to renovate the house, and I'd like to see the ocean. Then let's renovate the house and travel to the beach. And will you come with me? If you want me to, I'll come." "I do." It was the first time since Mitchell's return that Dorothy had clearly shown she wanted his company. The moment marked the official beginning of their reconciliation. In the following months, mother and son worked together, planning Dorothy's new life. The first step was to hire an architect to renovate the house, keeping its simplicity, but adding comforts she had never had: an indoor bathroom, a modern kitchen, heating for the winter. The second step was the trip to the coast. Dorothy, who had never left West Virginia, was amazed to see the ocean for the first time. They spent 2 weeks in a comfortable hotel in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where she could fulfill her dream of setting foot on the sand and feeling the salt water. "It's bigger than I imagined," she said, standing on the beach watching the endless horizon. "What did you imagine?" "The ocean. I always heard about it, but I could never imagine it was so big." "Did you like it?" "Very much, but I missed our land too." "Our land?" "Yes, ours. You are my son. That is your land too." "Thank you for saying that, Mother." During the trip, they talked about many things that had been left unresolved during the years of separation. Dorothy told him about the loneliness she had felt, about the nights she cried thinking of her son. Mitchell spoke about the guilt he carried, about how he had convinced himself he was doing the right thing when in fact he was just being selfish. "Why did it take you so long to come back?" she asked one night as they walked on the beach. "Because the more time passed, the harder it got. At first, I thought I'd be back in a few months. Then it was a year, then 2, then 5. You reach a point where you convince yourself it's too late to fix things. It's never too late. Now I know that. Are you happy now?" "Happier than I've been in the last 5 years. And you?" "I'm learning to be happy again. It's strange to have money, but having you around makes it all worthwhile." When they returned from the trip, the mining on the property had already begun. Large machines worked in a delimited area far from the house, extracting the valuable material that had remained hidden for so long. The noise was constant, but Dorothy had gotten used to it. "Do you regret selling?" asked Mitchell, watching the operation. "No. It was the right decision for me. I have more money than I can spend, and you all handle all the complicated parts. And now that you're rich, has anything changed in your routine?" "A few things. I eat better, sleep in a comfortable bed, don't worry about bills anymore. But I still tend to my garden." "You still grow vegetables?" "I do, but now I don't need to sell them. I give them to the neighbors and to families in need." "You like helping people?" "I always have. Before I couldn't because I was in need myself. Now I can." This conversation gave Mitchell an idea. If his mother liked helping other people and now had the resources to do so, perhaps they could create something more structured and permanent. "Mom, what do you think about us creating a small institution to help needy families in the area?" "What kind of institution?" "I'm not exactly sure. We can research what's most needed here in the region. Maybe home repairs, food baskets, scholarships for young people." "Would you help organize it?" "Of course. It could be our project, something we do together." I like the idea. In the following months, Mitchell and Dorothy worked on creating what ended up becoming the Dorothy Harper Social Assistance Institute. They started small, helping a few families with home repairs and providing monthly food baskets. The project grew gradually. They hired a social worker to identify the neediest families, an accountant to maintain financial transparency, and some workers to carry out the repairs. Mitchell took on the general coordination of the institute, finally finding a purpose that gave him genuine satisfaction. "You know what I discovered?" he said to his mother one day after handing over the keys to a renovated house to a family living in precarious conditions. "What? That helping other people is much more rewarding than making money for myself." "Why?" "Because when you make money for yourself, the satisfaction is short-lived. When you help someone, the satisfaction lasts forever." I always knew that. That's why I never minded being poor as long as I could help my son. I'm sorry it took me so long to learn that lesson, Mum. What matters is that you learned it. 2 years after the discovery of the mineral, Dorothy's life had been completely transformed, but in a way she had never imagined. Yes, she was rich, but that wealth had given her something far more valuable: the opportunity to have her son back and to help other people. The Dorothy Harper Institute had become a reference in the region. They had renovated over 100 homes, provided scholarships for 50 young people, and created a permanent assistance program for needy families. Dorothy was respected and admired, not for being rich, but for using her wealth wisely and generously. Mitchell had found a life he never knew he wanted. He worked every day with purpose, lived near his mother, and felt he was contributing to something bigger than himself. He had dated a teacher from town, Rebecca, who admired the Institute's work and had become a close friend of the family. "Are you happy now?" Dorothy asked Mitchell one afternoon, as they planned the expansion of the Institute. "Very happy. Happier than I imagined I could be. Even though you're less wealthy than you were in Charlotte. Mom, I was never truly rich. I had money, but I didn't have anything that really mattered. Now I do." "What do you have now?" "I have you. I have a purpose. I have the feeling that I'm living the right way. And you don't miss your old life. No. The only thing I feel is gratitude for having a second chance to be your son. You were always my son, even when you were far away. But now I'm the son you deserved to have from the beginning. You were always the son I wanted, Mitchell. I just needed to find out who you really were." That night, mother and son had dinner together as they had every night for 2 years. The simple table in the renovated house was set with the new dishes Dorothy had bought, but the food was still prepared by her herself: rice, beans, vegetables from the garden, and roasted meat. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "You may." "Have you completely forgiven me?" "I forgave you a long time ago." "When?" "The day you said you were going to stay here forever. In that moment, I knew you had truly changed." "And you're not afraid I'll leave anymore?" "No, because now I know that even if you had to leave for some reason, it would be different. You wouldn't abandon me again." "I will never abandon you again, Mom. I promise." "This time I believe your promise." "Why?" "Because now you know what really matters in life." "And what matters?" "Family, love, being with those you love and helping those in need. It took me 5 years to learn that. Some people take their whole lives and never learn. 3 years after the discovery of the mineral, Dorothy celebrated her 73rd birthday with a big party at the Institute's headquarters. All the families who had been helped by the project were present: the staff, Attorney Benjamin, Dr. Charles, and many town residents. Mitchell gave an emotional speech, talking about how his mother had become an inspiration for the entire region, not only for her generosity but for her wisdom and kindness. He also spoke about his own learning, about how he had discovered that true wealth wasn't in money, but in relationships and life purpose. "My mother has always been rich," he said to the audience. "Rich in love, in kindness, in wisdom. I was the poor one, poor in spirit, poor in understanding what really matters in life. She taught me that true wealth lies in loving and being loved, in helping and being helped, in being present in the lives of the people who matter to you." Dorothy cried upon hearing her son's words, not from sadness, but from a deep and full joy. She had lost 5 years with him, but now she was certain that the years that remained would be lived together with love, purpose, and meaning. "Thank you," she said to Mitchell when he finished the speech. For what? For coming back, for changing, for giving me the opportunity to be truly happy. Thank you for forgiving me, for giving me a second chance. There will always be second chances for those who truly love. In the renovated yet still simple house, Dorothy continued to tend her small garden, not because she needed the vegetables, but because that little patch of earth connected her to her roots, to the woman she had always been. The money had changed her possibilities, but it hadn't changed her essence. Mitchell had built a simple house on the other side of the property, near his mother, but respecting her independence. Rebecca had moved there after the wedding, and they planned to have children who would grow up knowing their great-grandmother and her values of simplicity and generosity. The Dorothy Harper Institute had expanded to 3 neighboring towns and helped hundreds of families each year. The mining money yielded enough to keep the institute running indefinitely, ensuring the help would continue even after Dorothy was no longer present. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Mitchell asked his mother one afternoon, as they watched children playing on the playground they had built at the institute. "Which choice? To use the money this way instead of each of us going our separate lives." "I'm sure it was the right choice." "Why?" "Because look around us. How many people are better off because of our choices? Hundreds. And us, are we better off? We are. Then it was the right choice. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this touching story and where you're following us from. Do you believe Mitchell made the right decision by returning home? Leave your opinion in the comments with your sincere words. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.